Welcome to the Spark of Ages podcast, where we're going to talk to game changers of all kinds about their big world-shaping ideas and what sparked them. I'm your host, Rajiv Parikh, and I'm the CEO and founder of Position Squared, a digital marketing company based in Palo Alto. So yes, I'm a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, but I'm also a business news junkie and a history nerd. I'm fascinated by how big world-changing movements go from the spark of an idea to an innovation that reshapes our lives. In every episode, we're going to do a deep dive with our guest about what led them to their own eureka moments and how they're going about executing it, and perhaps most importantly, how do they get other people to believe in them so that their idea can also become a spark for the ages. This is the Spark of Ages podcast. In addition to myself, we have our producer, Sandeep, who will occasionally chime in to make sure we don't get too in the weeds with tech jargon.
Yep, that's me, man. I'm really excited about this interview because we do interactive technology. So I'm gonna pick Jon's brain about interactive
Jon is a marketing rock star. He's an entrepreneur with 3 exits, and he's the guy who wrote the book on the latest innovations in marketing technology. Literally. He's the author of DemandBase's definitive guide to ABM/ABX and Marketo's definitive guide to marketing automation.
That's very definitive. And spoiler alert to our listeners, the guy that wrote the book on B2B marketing might actually be leaving marketing.
We'll get into that. But bottom line, he's an innovator and defining voice in this field, and we're going to find out what sparks him. So, Jon, it's really great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
There's so much for us to get into, so much to talk about. I first met you in 2006, I think. And this was your early days when you were just at the beginning of Marketo. And so I'm really excited to have you here so many years later and be able to have you on this show and get your background and your spark out there. You've been on so many shows. You guys have your own show at DemandBase that you're frequently a host for. You're a pro at standing in front of crowds and getting your ideas and concepts out to the market. You're a domain expert, so much so that there are folks who in my team are such Marketo believers that they literally wear purple all the time. We think they bleed purple. And you've created your own categories and have been a true innovator. So today I want to go on a little bit of a different path than the ones you've gone down before. So let's start with the new path you're going on now. Tell our listeners your big news.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, as you and I have talked a little bit about pre-show, my role at DemandBase has sort of recently evolved. I've been the CMO at DemandBase for almost the last 3 years since we merged Engagio and DemandBase together. And we've recently hired our new CMO here at DemandBase, and I've taken on a role as sort of evangelist and consultant. So what's exciting about that is I get to continue to do what I love and, talk to customers about what's happening in ABM and go to market and share best practices and do all that kind of stuff. But I also have a little bit of time to sort of be working on my next thing. And be candid, I don't know what that is yet at this point.
I'm just curious about it, like your emotions at this state, like being sort of free, like in this new kind of freed state. Like, are you excited? Is there some nervousness, anxiousness? Like, what are you sort of going through?
I'm excited to be excited. And what I mean by that is once I land on the thing, I know I'll get really excited for whatever I choose and dive into that. And right now it's more of just like, looking out at kind of a world of infinite possibilities.
Yeah.
It could be anything, right? I mean, my next startup could be literally anything I want it to be.
Yeah, this is not going to be like the next evolution in marketing potentially. Like in your mind, you have like that Leonard Skinner song, right? You're free as a bird now. I'm as free as a bird. Yeah. Is that where you are?
It is. And I mean, I may not stay in MarTech, right? I mean, yeah. There's things out there really interesting on the sales side. There's B2C things. AI is obviously so transformative that if I'm going to stay in tech, I mean, obviously thinking about what AI can do, but I'm not even holding myself to stay in software. So we'll see what happens.
You and I were just at a recent AI dinner, right? And marketing is just blowing up with regard to generative AI. The whole thing is transitioning and changing. So it's, even hard to forecast where it's going to be in the next year or two.
Absolutely.
We're going to take you back a little bit. So you have a degree from Harvard in physics. Here's a quote that was written on a profile piece about you that I found interesting. A career in physics is lucrative, said no one ever. However, you can take up physics, do a little bit of fusion research, and then do stints in management consulting, and eventually find your way to being a co-founder of a company that shapes the marketing tech space. Sounds weird, doesn't it? So I just wonder, like, when you originally went into physics, is that just something that really interests you? Are you like a first principles type of person?
I was always fascinated with sort of like the big questions in physics, like, does the universe have an end? And, does it infinitely expand forever, or will, it eventually contract? And so does time have a start and then a stop to it? Just literally questions about infinity sort of always kind of would blow my mind. It's other things like, time travel and, if you could go faster than the speed of light, does that mean you're going to go backwards in time?
You would sit in general and just wonder about the nature of things.
Yeah, it was, and really the big questions. Really, I actually even considered going. One of the programs I applied to for college was a dual major in physics and philosophy. And I loved the idea of kind of like, how can you use science to just really understand kind of the way of the world. So I'd always assumed that my career path would be in academia. And I'd go and get a PhD. I spent my summers. I got a job at Lawrence Livermore National Labs. So that's where I was doing the fusion research. And then I actually got into a PhD program that I applied to my senior year. And it was only sort of by sort of chance that I sort of started, even considering, other options.
So I'm just curious, like, where did this all come from? Like, was it from your parents, this desire to find the answer to the meaning of life, the universe, and everything? Or was it just your own thinking?
It always fascinated me. My dad was an attorney and my mom was a teacher, but, even my dad did a lot of teaching as well. So I will say, I do always sort of say I come from a family of educators. So there's some connection there. But yeah, the direct hard sciences was just something that was fascinated by. Yeah,
I kind of think like when you talk about being into math, right, and then going into marketing. So a lot of what people associated marketing, this is back in even in the mid 90s or even before that, is a lot of times the marketer, they come up with a brand, they come up with a story, they come up with a message, and then it was a bit of a dark art to figure out if what you're doing is actually working or not, right? And there's consumer advertising where you run TV ads and you do all these surveys and things. You didn't know if you were actually driving any revenue. So is that sort of like, if you think about that, is that what led you to say, hey, maybe marketing is kind of interesting?
Yeah, it was less direct than that, to be honest. I was doing, my summer work at Lawrence Livermore National Labs. I got into a PhD program at MIT, but I had looked at sort of the lives that the physics PhDs that I had been working with, the lives they had. And, they weren't researching time travel and the end of the universe and everything. They were researching the stuff you can get paid to research.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is, fusion and plasma dynamics and things like that. And I was going to end up going to MIT to research plasma dynamics.
Wow.
I was like, I don't know. Is that really what I got into this to do? And always be looking to get the next grant, and that kind of stuff. And at the same time, there was all this recruiting going on for management consulting and investment banks. And I was like, well, that seems pretty fun. And I'll be totally candid. I'm probably smarter than most of the people doing that. So I should, why should they make more money? And so I actually got MIT to defer my admission for a year. And I was like, well, let me just try this other kind of, business world out. Because again, you got to remember, my mom was a teacher, my dad was a lawyer. I didn't come from even understanding what business was. Like, I thought people go to offices and like, they seem to like send faxes around, but I don't really know what they're doing. I was like, that's how little I knew.
Yeah, they push
Right.
they push things around. So you're sitting there going like, yeah, they're pushing some stuff around. I don't know if it's a real thing.
Yeah.
And then you have this science experience and you're like, wow, they're just shilling for research grants and they're not getting to really pursue what they're passionate about.
And I was at that firm for a little over a year. And I was, because of my connotative background, I was sort of being put on the more analytical projects. Which led me to actually a boutique consulting firm called Exchange Partners. And the founder of Exchange Partners had this really interesting methodology about how to use analytics to understand the value exchange between what you put into a customer and what a customer gives into you. And how do you create really valuable experiences that create more mutual value in the exchange. And he realized that a lot of the recommendations from the methodology couldn't be implemented without technology. So he went and acquired an old marketing technology company that was originally called Exchange Applications, as comparison to us in the consulting firm Exchange Partners. That company was successful, was eventually rebranded as Exchange and had an IPO as a successful MarTech company. So when I was getting ready to graduate business school in 1999, I mean, it was 1999. Everybody's going into tech.
It was crazy, right? It was the internet boom. 99 was the crescendo of the internet boom, right?
98 or 99.
Yeah.
I mean,
I got out of business school in 97 and I went in and I was like working at Sun and then I went to Alta Vista. Internet was just crazy, maniacal.
So, and I had never thought about, I'm going to have a career in tech. I thought I'd probably go back to consulting after business school, but it was like, well, you have to work in tech. And there was this company called Epiphany that was just down the street in Palo Alto, and they were building a marketing technology product to compete with Exchange. This company that I sort of had a sister association with. So somehow, despite the fact I had zero experience in tech, I got a job as a product manager there because I knew a little bit about the space. So I was in product management for a while there, found myself gravitating a little bit more to the product marketing side over the years.
Right. Which makes sense. I mean, you were more structured and more analytical. So you'd want to create products, right? I mean, you'd want to build things.
Yep.
And specify.
So when we finally sold Epiphany in 2004, and it was sort of time to do something next, I was like, all right, I've been doing this for a while. I think I'm ready to run marketing for a little tiny startup. I was interviewing at a couple of different places. And at the same time, that's when I was talking with Phil Fernandez, who had been the president of Epiphany, kind of hey, there ought to be a company somewhere, that's eventually those conversations became Marketo. So it's a little indirect how I kind of, navigated from physics into consulting into MarTech. But there is that kind of a common theme there, I think, of being analytical, being quantitative, and like kind of having like a systems orientation to the thinking.
Well, I think it's boiling it down to its essence, right? So, when you think about some of the problems we dealt with before in marketing, we just couldn't measure what we were doing, right? Like we were trying things out, we were hoping it worked. Sometimes we wonder, was it the product? Was it sales? What was marketing doing? And you got answers far later. And it sounds like, Jon, by putting an analytical mindset to it, you saw that need at Marketo to attach marketers more closely to revenue.
It always has bugged me, that, marketing doesn't have as much credibility and respect. I was talking to a marketer the other day who was talking about how the fact that their CFO has some opinions on the brand. And I asked this marketer if they had opinions on the accounting in return.
That's right.
But that's the nature of marketing. Everybody, thinks that they can have an opinion on the brand and the marketing, and whatnot. That's fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but not everybody understands the nuances of kind of what's actually happening in marketing as well. So I have definitely always sought to help marketing earn their seat at the revenue table, get more credibility, get respect. Part of that is by using the language of business and not the language of marketing when you're kind of talking outside of, the walls of your own department. And part of it is being analytical and quantitative.
I think it was kind of revolutionary at the time. And I mean, I was there at that time. I similarly started my company because I wanted to take an engineering approach to marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to show directly that what we were experimenting with was turning into actual revenue, and demand gen enabled that. And I think you took it a step further, even further, not just on the consumer side, but to the business side, where to make a sale, it just takes longer and it takes more people to drive it, and it's harder to measure. And I think you pioneered the notion of the revenue marketer, the notion of the power of inbound. I think it was one of the things you pushed.
I'm not going to take credit for pioneering all these things. I mean, there are lots of other people.
Come on, John, you're on my show. You're gonna get all these things.
The Petowitz group was talking about revenue marketing, inbound, or HubSpot was obviously talking about inbound.
That was way later. Come on now, HubSpot.
Brian Carroll was talking about lead nurturing before I came along.
But you put it together.
That's what I was sort of going to say is, I think one of the things that I've always done really well in my career is to synthesize things together. And it goes back to that, simplify and explain, combining multiple trends and patterns and things like that.
Yeah, see the big picture. See how the universe works. See if there's an end to the universe.
With a philosophical framework.
Yeah, that's right.
So then, like, you had this great career at Marketo, right? You went through a lot of stuff in getting there. This is when I think you said your wife was pregnant and you're about to have your kid and you decided to do a startup, but you went through all that. You went through some amazing trials and tribulations. This is never easy to sell a concept like this. Then you got it to a point of success. How did that feel like to go through that whole set of emotions, right? There's a whole range of emotions. If your parents weren't in business before, you heard about some of this from folks at Stanford. You got exposed to tons of business leaders. Was it what you expected?
Well, I mean, you've been you're a founder entrepreneur yourself. You don't start a company thinking it's going to fail.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you start a company with hopes and dreams, kind of for the success that's going to happen. And it's almost like you'd be naive to, like, if you really knew how hard things are going to be along the way, probably nobody would do it.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to say like, oh, I always knew Marketo was going to be successful.
Right.
But you kind of go into it assuming, yeah, we're onto something. We have a good idea here.
Yeah.
What I didn't appreciate at the time, though, is frankly, how many things need to come together,
right,
to really make a good success like Marketo.
A lot of
things got to line up right.
Right.
What were some of the surprising elements that had to come together?
I think you really need the time to be right. You need to have really good product market fit, which is sort of related to that, but kind of could be separate. And then you need great internal execution. And I think if you don't have all three of those pillars, you're not going to create a great company. When you're first starting a company, it's hard to kind of really see that.
Right.
Even if I get to Engagio, which we'll talk about in a minute, and my company after Marketo,
right.
I'd argue in retrospect, if I look at it, timing was a little early, especially for how we were tackling ABM.
That's right.
Partly because of that, we never quite got product market fit exactly right. But I do think we brought really good execution to the table.
Yeah.
But you add those together and Engagio was good, not great in terms of success.
Yeah. So, I mean, would you say when you left, you got Marketo to a point of going public, you'd be up on stage at Dreamforce, right? The big Salesforce conference, doing all these great discussions about how things are changing dramatically for marketers, right? You had your own big events that Marketo was putting out. You had a whole bunch of adherence to it. And then you said, well, I want to go and do something new. I want to start it myself. Like in the first one, you were with Phil Fernandez, and you went with someone you knew, or had some familiarity with because you were at a previous company with him. And then you went and started it with him. And then, there was this thing in your head saying, no, I got to do my own thing. Or was it, you know what, we're not doing this method of marketing right, and so we're going to go this way? Which it was, or was it both? Or was it just all these VCs saying, John, if you start something, we're going to throw a bunch of money at you. We love you.
So I'll start with like a quick little, anecdote. there's a guy named Clint Oram, who was one of the founders and executive at Sugar CRM. He worked for me way back in the days at Epiphany. I remember having coffee with him in the early days of Marketo. When we were just kind of getting up and running. I'm like, hey, tell me your entrepreneur story. And he said something to me at the time. He's like, Sugar CRM's far enough along now. We're a bigger company. It doesn't feel like my baby or my company anymore. It feels like a job.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying that. So that's in my brain. Fast forward 9 years later at Marketo. We've had our IPO. We're 1,000 people. We've hired somebody else to be the CMO. And, I'm focusing on some other things. And I realized this doesn't feel like my baby anymore. It feels like a job.
Yeah.
And I wanted it. I was like, I liked that in those early days, when it felt like, I had the excitement and energy of feeling it, like my baby. So that was really the impetus of it. Was I realized I loved just the startup experience and I wanted to go do that again. And coming off of the Marketo IPO, I mean, I made less money probably than most people think, but I made well enough that, the mortgage was paid and I didn't have to worry about some of the things I was worried about when we started Marketo. And so I had the sort of resources to be able to sort of say, I can do this, with me as the CEO lead. And I think I'm ready for that challenge.
Yeah. I mean, you had the big win, right? You had a win. It was known as something that you created and you enabled or key part of, and you had the big win. And, at a certain point when a company gets large, they're running big studies and things take time and it's all about big coordination and it feels
things take time.
It just takes a lot of process driving. You can't just flip on a dime and try something new. You have some room too, but it's harder to move a machine and it just gets more fun to start the next thing. Right. And so like Engagio, was there like this one insight that just said, yeah, I got to do that?
Engagio started with I want to start a company, in some cases, like where I am now.
Yeah.
The only difference then is I knew I wanted to start something in marketing.
Right.
Just marketing tech, because that was what I wanted to kind of continue. I had probably 4 or 5 different kind of ideas I was exploring, ranging from an ad tech solution to a machine learning based decisioning engine, to what we eventually decided to call ABM. I called it at the time kind of just more kind of targeted outbound. And then again, a lot of interesting lunches with people where you learn things over time. Lunch with Maria Pergolino, who was the CMO. I think she was at Aptus at the time. She worked for me back at Marketo. And she was like, I really think you should do this ABM thing. It's hot, it's coming. Everybody's talking about it. And so that sort of, that plus like getting some sort of signs that maybe the other ideas weren't as good started getting me really narrowed in on kind of ABM as the right strategy.
For everybody who doesn't know, ABM is account-based marketing.
Okay, cool. I was nodding like I knew. I just kept nodding, but I didn't know.
Yeah, it's about focusing your marketing efforts on the bigger companies in a very specific, proactive way, as opposed to more broad-based marketing. The analogy is a lot of broad-based marketing is like fishing with a net. ABM is more like fishing with a spear.
The idea of this is that instead of just throwing out a whole bunch of messages and hoping something comes up, you really target a company. And when you target a company or target certain types of companies at certain levels of scale, there's just a different way that you sell, because you're not selling to a single person. You have to get a whole bunch of people to coordinate their action to make a decision, right? Anything that costs at least, hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars or could potentially completely change the company, it requires a lot of people to get aligned by it.
Yep.
Yeah. Right.
And ABM also brings more sense of focus.
Yes.
You sort of like, I can't like, it's a thesis that you need to be personal and relevant and targeted to be effective in today's crowded market. And you can't do that for everybody. So a lot of ABM is just, how do I focus my limited resources onto fewer things and therefore be more effective?
And be way more effective instead of just spray and pray. And so then you created Engagio. You had a whole great set of tools to enable account-based marketing. And then you found that it was a better move to go and enabled yourself to be acquired by DemandBase.
Yeah, sort of interesting story there. you mentioned earlier, like I've created categories. Again, I don't think I've created categories. I think I've found existing categories and exploited opportunity, in there. Like I didn't create marketing automation.
Right.
Eloqua was around
They were right
before
they were originally
Marketo
there.
came along.
Yeah, a good friend is Mark Organ, one of our early investors. Yeah.
And in the same way, mobile phones existed before the iPhone came along.
Sure.
Right. But what happened is the iPhone came along and introduced what has become the dominant design. Right. And then once that came in, it was so dominant, everyone was like, okay, yeah, phones don't have keyboards. Phones are these like rectangles with big screens. Right. And that's that was a dominant design. So I believe in many ways it's more lucrative, easier, better, lots of advantages if you can don't create the category, but if you can come in to an existing category and create the dominant design.
Right. Like if we look at history you brought up the mobile phone, right? There were many mobile phones, right? Nokia had like 30 of them of all different shapes and sizes, all different. You had keyboards, you had pens. Nobody was really, you had the trackball, right? Nobody was really using the finger as the interface, right? And enabling it to be this and have a single operating system that can run across so many different applications, right? So there was the concept was there, but iPhone made it a singular design. And so your thought was very similar, I think, with some of these.
I didn't necessarily know that was a great strategy doing Marketo, but I learned that was a strategy for me. So fast forward to Engagio. Again, I didn't invent ABM. ITSMA coined the term, and then DemandBase was out there using ABM as a word. DemandBase had been helping to create the market and the category around ABM. So I came along and thought with Engagio, like, all right, I'm going to go tackle that, and maybe I can build a better dominant design, for doing this. 5 years into Engagio, though, what had happened was pretty interesting because I built a really compelling product for kind of, I would say, middle and bottom of the funnel of the ABM process. DemandBase had kept innovating, and they had built a really amazingly compelling product really for kind of the top of the funnel of ABM with things like advertising and web personalization and traffic de-anonymization. It started to become clear to me that the dominant design in ABM wasn't going to be what either of us were doing. It was going to be the combination of the two platforms.
Nice.
And I looked at my roadmap, and it was going to take me 3 years to get to all the things that I needed if I were doing it organically. I started having conversations with DemandBase, and they were, we had enough open kimono that they were able to share that it was going to take them 3 years to build what they thought they needed. And so once I realized that this combination was a fast track to what I believed would be the dominant design, it was inevitable that we would find a way to kind of bring these companies together. Even though it was bummer for me and a little hard to no longer be the CEO, I set out to build the next great marketing platform, and this was going to be the path to get there.
And sometimes, so it sounds like it's almost like you found the Reese's, right? You found the chocolate and the peanut butter and you put it together, and now you had a dominant design. And I think sometimes the hard part about when you start up these companies, you want to be the CEO, you feel that energy about it. And then as part of putting it together, you have to subsume your role and be part of the team again, right? So you went back to becoming, I think first you were chief product officer, then you became CMO. And so, you got to continue that journey and build something great for people.
Yeah. So it's been a little over 3 years now since we kind of did the merger with Engagio and DemandBase. And I think we've done some really amazing things and helped to build the company. I'm proud of it. I'm still here as a consultant, even as I work on the next thing, but it does feel like a job.
We're going to mix it up now with a little game segment called Spark Tank. Because, you guys get it? To the show, Shark Tank? Okay, anyway, let's dive right in. Jon, at least one thing that I noticed when I was watching your presentations, I think it's fairly obvious to notice because you break into dad jokes every once in a while. It seems like dad jokes are, if not, there's certainly a tool in your toolkit, something you're well versed in. So what I wanted to do for this game was I wrote some dad jokes myself. I'm a writer. And then I had ChatGPT. I had AI write some dad jokes as well. And so the game is you guys are going to have to determine which ones are written by me, the human, or written by AI. And then most importantly, we're going to find out whether or not if I'm funnier than ChatGPT.
All right.
So are you up for the challenge?
I really hope you are, because every time I've had GPT try to write me a dad joke, it's been really pretty horrible.
Yeah, I'll say this. I also punched some of their jokes up because I was like, "This I can't."
It's too
You're
conscious.
cheating. You're cheating. So it's either Sandeep written or Sandeep augmented.
It's
okay.
Sandeep enhanced.
That's true.
It's it. So, by the way, before you go into it, this is a Jon Miller feature. We had him at a wonderful private event, and every other slide was a dad joke. So he kept it rolling.
I love it. I want to get into the strategy of that. I want to understand the strategic mindset behind that. But let's get into the game, and then we'll talk about that. All right. My accountant girlfriend finally broke up with me. She said, in the end, no matter how hard I tried, I just wasn't into it.
That's pretty good, and that's human.
The intuit part made it more human, but I don't know. Okay, I'll say it's human.
Well, I'm into that. Yes, I did write that. Thank you so much. Pretty good. I'll take pretty good as the quote there. All right, number 2. What did Steve Jobs say when he saw Rome for the first time? I came, I saw, I conquered.
I mean, I think it's pretty good because it uses the I a lot. And it's clever. So because it's clever, I'm also going to say this is human Sandeep written.
Yeah, especially, I mean, if it's written, I came, right? I'm going to assume that was written that way. And if so, then
the eyes are lowercase. I didn't perform them lowercase, but that's
okay. As long as the eyes are lowercase, I'm going human.
Is there a way to perform lowercase?
I came, I saw, I conquered. You are both correct. 2-2.
Yeah, look at that.
I did write both of those.
All right.
So agents, if you're looking out, I'm available. Number 3. What did the Apple Watch say to the broken Rolex? Well, I may be smart, but you're timeless.
That's not bad, but again, partly just because some of these are going to have to be GPT, and that one's not that particularly clever. I'll go GPT.
Oh, metagaming. You're metagaming now. All right, GPT from Jon.
I think it's GPT too. I felt that when I.
You can't always pick the same answers as Jon. Otherwise, you can't pick a winner. Okay, fine. Okay. But you guys both get a point here.
We're doing this collaboratively. It's not competitively.
Okay, that's right. It could be a co-op.
We're account-based marketing. We're account-based.
All right. Well, you both got it right. That it was in fact. Now there was a little tweak to it, but that was still mostly GPT.
So it was even worse before you tweaked it.
It was even worse. Yes.
Okay, because it wasn't terrible, which is my general feeling about most of the GPT jokes.
Number 4, we got 3 more. How did the farmer turn into a tech entrepreneur? The only thing they could grow was their Instagram following.
Oh, see, I feel like that one is GPT.
I agree.
I don't know.
I'm basically going with how funny they are.
You guys are sniffing them out. Look, this is not going to pass the Turing test anytime soon. GPT. I mean, you guys
not for jokes. Definitely not for jokes.
Not for jokes. That's what I'm saying. All right, 2 more. Here we go. What do you call a startup that only some people believe exists? A Sasquatch.
All right, I like that one, and I'm just gonna assume this is Sandeep. It's just too clever
again
for GPT to do Sasquatch.
It made me laugh, so I'm going human.
Yeah, human, correct. You guys got it. Ding, ding, ding. 5 for 5 so far. All right, finally. Why did the Tesla car blush? Well, it mistook the charging cable for something else. Talk about a shocker.
Okay.
I don't think that was that funny, but I don't ever see GPT being risque at all. So I'll actually lean human on that one too.
Sandeep created jokes are like They just connect things that a normal machine wouldn't connect. So I'm gonna disagree with you, John, on this one and say this is GPT.
Okay, here we go. So now we're gonna have a winner. This is perfect. So Rajiv, you say it was GPT. John, you say it was human. Well, guess what? This was the most integrated one. So in a way, you're both right, but this was a ChatGPT driven one that I added the shopper joke.
There's some enhancements.
I had to.
All right. So was it GPT 3.5 or 4 that you were using?
It was 3.5. I'm gonna edge it out just barely to John because he's our guest. It's the right thing to do.
It was a collaborative effort the whole way.
You're such an Indian. I can't believe it.
Yeah, guests are gone. Guests are gone. John, so hey, what's your favorite dad joke? And maybe maybe give us a little insight on your love of dad jokes and like why you weave them into your presentations. And
yeah, I don't know if I have a single favorite. One I like these days a little bit is my geography teacher asking me to name a country with no R in it. I responded, no way.
Nice. It always takes that second, you know. The good dad jokes take a second.
Take a second.
Right, here's one that's even harder a little bit. Yeah. So I have a fear of overly intricate sets of buildings. You could say I have a complex.
Nice. All three definitions of complex. Well played.
I have a complex just thinking about it.
Anyway, I got a lot more of them. I mean, where it came from, to be totally candid, is I'm just not that funny. And I always like a presenter on stage who can crack some jokes and make the audience laugh. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that naturally. So I'm just going to do it unnaturally. And then after doing it and having it work out pretty well, it just sort of became my thing.
Well, it totally works. It keeps your attention, you know, it sort of snaps you back into attention sometimes if your mind is starting to drift. Good stuff.
I think in today's mobile phone interrupt driven world, which I do have a rant about, a total interrupt driven world, it's a good way of capturing people's attention and bringing them back.
Yeah, I think bringing it back to
people are just all
right, so
over the
I'll give you one more that's sort of appropriate as we're doing this one. So my coworkers, they always laugh at my jokes when we're together, but never over online meetings. It turns out I'm not even remotely funny.
I laughed ahead of time because I knew this one was coming. I heard it from your presentation.
Online, remotely.
Strong.
I like that. Good end to that one. I like that. Here's my rant. Nowadays, the app makers and the phone folks, all these guys know that we're so ADD. And then on purpose, whenever we go into their website, their app, they're always hitting us with an interruption.
I think the reality is that's a side effect of the fact that attention's so scarce. Everybody feels like, oh, I have a moment of attention. I need to sort of somehow maximize, take advantage of it.
On it.
But it's at the cost of annoying the consumer. So it may not be the right strategy long term, but there's an awful lot of marketers and folks out there who, they're driven but their metrics drive them to suboptimal near-term strategies.
Yep. They just drive you up the wall. So that's what it is. So John, if you were to think about people who take risk like you do, they just don't, your parents, your father went down the attorney path, your mom was a teacher, your mom's a teacher. It just doesn't happen, I think, for most entrepreneurs. There's something like literally you bumped in and said, I have this dream to be an entrepreneur. That
wasn't me.
No.
It really wasn't me. Wow. I mean, even when it came down to starting Marketo, I was interviewing at some little startup. I was interviewing at Fair Isaac.
Yeah.
Which is a neat company. I was like, because it was like, how can I use my data and analytics skills? Well, Fair Isaac does neat data and analytics stuff.
Yeah. For everyone who doesn't know, Fair Isaac is the algorithm that underpins your FICO scores.
Yeah. And then they actually do have a bunch of other algorithms too, but that's one they're
is that the FI in FICO?
Yeah.
Oh, just learned that.
You learn something every day. Mm-hmm. The job I almost took instead of Marketo was to be a Forrester analyst.
Oh.
And because I sort of thought
you'd be one of those folks on stage. Yeah. You would be on stage.
I like the writing and the presenting and all that kind of stuff. So that's why I thought that might have been a decent job. And I like the fact it would get me to travel out to Boston a couple times a year. I love Boston. But and then there was Marketo. And I was like, so literally I was evaluating these different opportunities, like which one's the best job? And obviously Marketo had more risk behind it. But because I was doing it with Phil and he was putting some money in, he was the CEO, he was more experienced executive, it really felt like it made the risk pretty tolerable. And then I discovered I loved it.
So you learn by doing.
Yeah. And then once I discovered I loved it, then A, I wanted to repeat it, and B, I had the resources to be able to manage the risk.
Yeah. And I think after Marketo, people were coming to you. I mean, a lot of times people feel like if you nailed the first time, especially in business to business, they feel like you could do it again because as another one of our podcasters told us or podcast guests told us, in business to consumer, it's kind of a hit driven thing. You get it and you may not get it again. But in business to business, once you start off down a path, your customers will help you. If you gain resonance with your customers, they will help you, right? So they probably saw that, hey, you did it, you nailed it. Let's do it again.
Yeah, that's the hope. And that's interesting. I hadn't heard that sort of about the sort of business to business versus business to consumer.
Yeah, it's a thing. I've seen this with I talked about this with VCs. You may have a home run with some product and you just caught a wave, and it may be you or it may be not you, and it's hard to do again.
Well, one of the elements of the 3 pillars you talked about was timing. That was the first one you mentioned. I feel like that's the one that's maybe most out of your hands in some respects, right?
Well, you get to pick the business idea.
Yeah. That's true. So it's about how you then sort of evaluate the timing, I guess, is the part where you actually have some agency, right?
Right. But a lot of entrepreneurs do get so enamored with their idea, or even worse, with their technology or their solution, that they sort of ignore, like, is the timing right?
Right. And I think this is where you have to be very open to listening to feedback from what you believe is the right customer. And of course, you have to pick the right customer and the right segment and all that. But you really have to be open to it, because if they really like you and like where you're going, they'll tell you. And it's a smaller world of people who are very similar that'll help connect you, and which is different than consumer behavior. Right?
Yeah,
we're dealing about
it's
masses.
tough though, because you go do these customer interviews, and like people wanted to like tell you good job, and like tell them they want to tell you they like your thing,
right?
And you have to it's a real skill to sort of get good at asking people sort of the questions in the way that will actually have them tell you that they think your baby's ugly.
That's right. That is the hardest part. And it's really about who are they, leading edge? Are they trailing edge? Are they in sync with you or not? There's a lot that goes into that, right? Which makes it even more difficult or more challenging. So Jon, based on that, what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone starting their career in B2B marketing?
Yeah. I mean, the one piece of advice I would sort of always try to give people, like, I mean, if you could literally like get somebody to sort of, take this, is to just try to embrace continuous learning and adaptation. Whether it's marketing or anything else. I mean, these are constantly changing, evolving things, like industries. So, if you're able to, have that kind of learning mindset, see how industry is changing, what technologies are changing, kind of just that curiosity, I think that, pays off, really, really well. You have to be able to tie that curiosity though with the ability to actually kind of execute and get some stuff done.
What would you say is your favorite technological innovation or invention? What was the thing that made it feel like magic to you, that sparked it to life to get you to build technology for people?
Yeah. I mean, certainly I'll share my favorite technology that, as I said, my path to sort of being an entrepreneur is slightly different. But the one that I always point to that just like seems like magic is Google Maps. I remember working at Epiphany in 2000, living in San Francisco, driving to San Mateo, and like what route I'm going to drive home, each day was always like trying to before I would leave, I'm like trying to look up traffic reports and which way do I take 101 or 280 and where's the, and the ability to just like punch in where you want to go and have like a traffic optimized route is, that we can just always have access to me is really, really amazing. And then over the years, they've added all these other things like I use it to plan bike rides.
Right.
And so I know how much elevation is ahead of me. I
find the best coffee shop on the way.
I love search along my route.
There's like an omniscience to it, right? You're like, wow, you get this sort of cosmic point of view on the world that you otherwise couldn't get. Yeah.
This question maybe also, if I can take us a slightly different direction for a half second.
Go for it.
Please.
Bring us a spark for the ages.
So everybody's talking about AI right now. And like, you got to have AI in your next solution. I feel like what everybody's doing mostly, though, is how do I use AI to solve existing problems better? And like SDRs send emails. How can my AI make better emails for my SDRs? That to me feels like Internet 1.0, where it was popsicles.com. I'm going to sell popsicles, but now I can sell them online. Where the real excitement from the internet came was Internet 2 and perhaps 3, but really when it was businesses like Facebook or Uber, or YouTube that like couldn't have existed without the internet, but aren't .com straight up taking an existing business.
Right.
And the question is, what is going to be AI 2.0? That's something I'm thinking about. I doubt I'm smart enough to be the one who like really figures that out for like a major business idea. But when you asked about a technology that's truly seemed magic, one that always kind of comes to mind is like silly little small thing. But my kids go to sleepaway camp. And in the past, every day they would load up photos from camp. And my wife would spend an hour playing Where's Waldo, looking through every photo for some sign of life of your kid, that your kid might be happy and smiling or standing next to a friend while at camp. And then last year, they introduced AI facial recognition, to this thing where you can load up a picture of your kid. And now you just get a notification every time there's a photo of your kid, loaded. This is not like a revolutionary business idea.
Not. You could pull that. You have the location. You can match it against other data of places that look like that, so you can basically figure it out. Right, the system should be able to figure it out.
You load your kid's photo, so it just says, "Here's photos of your kid."
Right, and write the description.
So it feels like magic because it just takes a problem and it just makes it work seamlessly. There's going to be ideas, that AI unlocks, that I think truly will just be sort of that next level. I don't know what it is. I'm excited for that though.
Well, Sandeep has a question he's dying to ask.
All right. So I'm curious about your take on, so the marketing world is moving to this cookieless world. And I know my brother was just earlier on the pre-show was talking about how, well, we can hack around that potentially. But I'm curious, like, we're moving this cookieless world and we're driving. Is it possible to drive better signals from interactive content and direct customer engagement with that content? Like, I create interactive shows. It's one thing I do. So that's our thesis. So I'm curious what your take is on that.
Well, I mean, to me, that's a flavor of just first party data. It gets almost into zero party data, depending on how you set up your interactive, content. Generally, that's the trend everybody is sort of moving towards for the cookieless world is, how do I take better advantage of that zero and first party data? We absolutely see that in B2B and ABM, just the rise in importance of taking advantage of the data, using it properly, using it effectively. So I guess, to sort of your question, specifically, interactive content, direct customer engagement is kind of, frankly, always going to be better than cookie-based third-party information. Marketers just have to sort of get good at using it.
That's right. I think we have to derive it. How we have to be better at. You're supposed to use third-party cookie information to do a better job with first-party information, so that when that person comes, you're preparing it with something better. But I agree. I think that's the game. It's all about being much more interactive and being very personal to what you want. It's almost good advertising, good content. Get people to where they want to go.
Okay, cool.
So one of the things, Jon, I know you love cocktails.
I do love cocktails.
And I had the wonderful pleasure of being with Jon at this amazing place in Austin, this underground bar where it not only mixed the history of cocktails, but also amazing cocktails. So what cocktail would you say, if you were to list three of them or even one of them that you love and the history behind it, what would it be?
I've been drinking a lot of the classics this year or recently, or kind of slightly modified classics. Probably my biggest go-to, is just the Manhattan. It's
Yes.
easy to make and it's classic for a reason. But I'm having a lot of fun with, you can really change the whole profile of a Manhattan by adding a quarter ounce of something. A quarter ounce of creme de cacao makes it into like an interesting dessert drink,
Whoa.
especially if you use like walnut bitters instead of Angostura bitters. I'm also a big fan of Amaros, which are kind of, Italian liqueurs, stands for bitter. There's, literally dozens, if not hundreds of ones you can kind of get. They're all very interesting profiles. Quarter ounce of an Amaro to your Manhattan's kind of a whole new drink.
Once again, you find the category and then you create the dominant version of it with some special sauce, mixing the two things together. Love it.
I'd say one of my favorite things when sometimes I just love the way it's presented. Like there was that one cocktail that we had where it had milk in it, but it was clear.
Oh, milk punch.
What?
I was like, I couldn't get it. I was like, how? And it didn't
sounds like
taste
gastronomical,
like it was delicious.
Something or other. No.
Oh, it was
so what happens is when
top.
you mix milk with alcohol, the alcohol causes all the milk particles the solids in the milk to curdle. And then if you filter that through like a fine cheesecloth or something, the curdles stay behind, and what you end up on the other side is a clear drink that has some of kind of the creamy mouthfeel and texture that you would get from the milk. It doesn't taste milky per se, but it definitely has a really interesting mouthfeel. And it's a cool way to make very innovative drinks that are, in some cases perfectly clear.
So from physics to chemistry, here we go. We're going full circle here.
Force. This is so much fun. All right, so Jon, now let's pretend. Now I know you're looking at your next thing, but let's pretend that money is no object and you can just do whatever you want. It could be TV show, book, podcast. It could be maybe mixing drinks, making drinks. It could be anything you want. Money's no object. You can do whatever you want. Like, what pops to mind?
This is the wacky thing I said at the beginning of the call.
Yeah.
My wife has her own direct-to-consumer shoe business. And, she always tells me all the time, what I really need is a marketer.
There you go.
Because she's the merchant. Yeah. She knows how to design the shoes and get the shoes and sell that. But she's kind of figuring out the marketing on her own.
Wow. So you become the DTC guy. You go from B2B marketer to direct to consumer expert.
For the next few months, at least, I'm probably going to, be spending at least some of my time helping to run marketing for a direct to consumer shoe brand called Bells and Becks.
Love it.
And, who knows? Maybe if that actually really helps her business take off, maybe that's what I end up doing. You never know.
Yeah. Make it bigger than Allbirds. Bigger and better. You can do it.
Awesome.
Well, Jon, thank you so much for coming in today and spending time with us and sharing with us all these amazing insights and experiences that you've had in just growing up, being part of the industry, enabling new companies to grow, and then talking about your next ambitions. I just love having you here. So thank you so much.
Great conversation. Thank you.
Hey, that was an amazing interview. I really enjoyed talking with Jon. He's just so full of interesting insight. And I love the fact that he always wants to figure out how things work. And that's what got him into physics. He's well planned, but at the same time, he has this notion of letting things flow.
His great advice was like adaptability, right? Like, and being able to, go with the flow. And yet he comes from this holistically, hard sciences, analyze, experiment, test, repeat, gather data for perspective. And it is really cool how he sort of marries those two aspects of himself.
All right. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the pod, please take a moment to rate it and comment. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, and everywhere podcasts can be found.
That's right. And the show is produced by myself, Sandeep Parikh, and Anand Shah. Production assistance by Taryn Talley. Edited by Sean Mayer.
I'm your host, Rajiv Parikh from Position Squared, a leading growth marketing company based in Silicon Valley. Come visit us at position2.com.
This has been an Effin' Funny production.
We'll catch you next time, and remember, folks, be ever curious.